Between the two of us, we've been through, I guess, three parental moves. Your
Mm-hmm.
mom, my mom and dad once, and then my mom into memory care. And I think all three times we were kind of confused, lost,
We
had no
thought this
idea.
was a good
Yeah,
option.
didn't really know, especially with my mom who moved to memory care. We had no
Mhm.
idea what we were doing.
We wanted to bring in an expert. So today we are talking to Christine Sevier. She is a senior advisor in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And when we are helping our parents, it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's not something that we've ever done before. I know Mike likes to say that when he took his parents independent living shopping, they thought, oh, it's kind of like looking for an apartment, or especially with memory care, but it really is, it's a lot more than that.
It's a lot more than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? It really is about identifying what residents' needs and matching like residents with like residents. So it's about deep diving with that family, finding out what's most important to their loved one and what type of support they need.
And there's a big difference between looking for independent living and assisted living.
100%. I would say if you're on the independent search side, bring your loved ones into the conversation as much as possible. Invite them out to a lunch or a brunch, or check the activities calendar and maybe check in with the director and say, hey, can I come to the Easter festivities? Can I bring my mom? Because you really want to see if this is a good community that matches what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. That was something that my mom really found at the community that she was, where she lives now, independent living, that she just felt like it was very homey and very comfortable. And for her, that was something that was really important. And there were a lot of activities.
Yeah. Yep. I think keeping the folks engaged as much as possible will keep them healthy. And I mean, we've seen since the pandemic that isolation was a complete burden. So having a sense of community and being able to cut up with some friends and go to a cocktail hour, I mean, those are important things, even at 70, 80 years old.
Mm-hmm. And location is a huge factor that I think a lot of people kind of overlook or don't think about quite as much because they think, oh, well, now they're in their own place, don't have to worry about them anymore. But like for my mom and dad, when they first moved to independent living, their final two choices were one that was about 5 miles from my sister's house and the one that was about 30 minutes away.
Yep.
And
but close to their doctors.
Yeah, close to their doctors. Yeah. And as my dad was talking to me about it, I said, are you kidding? Stay close to my sister, stay close there because if something happens, you want her there.
Absolutely.
And he was like, oh, yeah, I guess so.
Absolutely. And especially if you're preparing for some complex health issues, I always tell families the best community that you can choose is the one that you're closest to, that you can get fastest to. Because the reality is that you're not going to hand over your parents and everything's going to be taken care of. No, you are a care partner in this whole dynamic relationship, and you're going to be walking alongside your care partners and making those decisions. And sometimes you have to get there very quickly to kind of say, hey, you know what, I'm going to follow the ambulance to the emergency and meet you at the community.
Yeah.
Now, when you start looking at assisted living, whether it's assisted living for health concerns or memory care, then that's kind of opens up a lot of different questions and things to look for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you already know you have, like, let's say a Parkinson's diagnosis in the family lineage, and you're going to be dealing with some complex health issues, you want to make sure that, yes, you can go into the assisted side until you need more support. Does the community have another level of support that they could bring in or move to the other side of the building, say a memory care or like a skilled care? Because that's going to be very important in the decision-making process, because there is a such thing as transfer trauma. So moving people over and over again and into a new environment with new people, they will see a significant decline during that period. So you really want stability and continuity of care.
As much as you can.
I'm very honest when I tell people, when we give presentations, when we're on other podcasts, anything like that, that when my sister and I were choosing a memory care place for our mom, we looked at 4 different places, and the one we chose was the one that kind of gave my sister a little hug because it was kind of an emotional time.
Yeah.
That's not a good reason. So we had no idea what questions to ask, what red flags to look for, but I know there are a lot out there that we probably should have been aware of.
Well, I do think that, having that sense of compassion, here's what I tell families when they're touring a community. Take a look at the care staff when you're touring. Do they look rushed? Are they speeding to the next client and don't even have time to say hello? Did the administrative staff, do they know somebody's parent's name when they're walking by? Are they saying, oh, hi, Betty, how's it going? I'll see you at 2:00 at bingo. Or is it just rush? That's another person. Like, those things should be important. Yeah. especially if you're seeing stressed out caregivers, or if you're in the community and, maybe you tour on a Monday or a Wednesday, and then you see that same caregiver Saturday. Does that caregiver have a day off? You want to make sure that they're not overworked, and you want to make sure that they're adequately staffed.
Yeah.
What are some other things that we should be visually looking for when we're in the community?
So I always think it's important that if you know your loved one likes to be made up every day and put on lipstick, even well into their 80s, like, are they made up? Do they have that sense of dignity, their hair brushed? So you're looking at, is the staff taking care of their grooming, right? I'm always looking at fingernails and making sure they're not dirty and everything's nice and clean. I'm looking at detailed information just so people can feel good about the choice that they're making. And then especially if the loved one can't ambulate or advocate for themselves, I'm always saying, hey, why don't you tap into those transparency records and just see what their performances have been like? Do they have a history of bed sores or personal rights violations? So we're asking those, doing that deep dive and making sure that, they are operating well.
Because especially if if your parents are in a situation where they really, as you mentioned, can't really take care of themselves as much as they used to. And I that was one thing that I actually commented on when we see pictures of Mike's mom, is that she always is well dressed. She looks nice. She has her fingernails painted and she has her purse, and so she just,
and that's important.
Yeah. And earrings. And she always has earrings on.
Yeah. And I know it's super important, because if you've worn that ring for 75 years, or if you had those earrings on, those pearl earrings that you wore every Sunday, like, you're going to feel for that. Maybe you can't communicate that, but your body is going to remember those earrings and that ring on your finger. So it's important that they still have, a sense of themselves.
Yeah, I feel like all of us as young adults and older adults, we're taught that when it's a job interview, we need to know the questions to ask, that we need to talk to the future employer about this and that, whether it's benefits or salary or whatever, have those good questions ready. And yet it's the same thing here, because it's kind of like a job interview where you're going to interview these people and talk to the people who are in charge of taking care of your parents. So you need to have good questions ready.
Absolutely. And I always tell families, like, go into this knowing that there may be some hiccups. There may be some situations that come up. So really outline your care plan and your expectations that you expect, or that your mom's, how she's used to being cared for. I always tell my families, like, and don't skip the things that she's done, for years. I know with my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, she had these fuzzy socks with like these lavender beads in them. And in order to regulate her, we had to microwave those socks, put them on her feet, so her feet were nice and warm. And then she was nice and calm and cozy and regulated, and she was good. But those are those things that you need to kind of jot down for your care team, so that there's no, unexpected expectations out there. And you're saying, look, this is how her day flows. This is what she does on a Sunday or, during the week. So that's important, because you guys are care partners in this.
What are some of the questions? I know there's probably a super long list, but can you give us just a few of those important questions that you might want to ask of the community?
Well, I'm definitely asking what they do in an event of emergency or unwitnessed fall, because that's going to happen. I promise you that's just the nature of, aging. Sometimes mobility is an issue. So what are the steps? Are they calling the family members, or do they get sent out to the emergency department right away? Is there a nurse in the building that can kind of manage that? In terms of medication management, checking in and saying, hey, who's taking care of medication management? And also, I want to make sure that, especially if someone can't advocate for themselves, I want to make sure that the community, what is their process in terms of charting intake and output? Because UTIs and dehydration is so important. And the older you get, sometimes you just forget to drink and you're like sitting there. But a lot of the communities will actually have, just like the hospitals will have a system, a log system that, what, Miss Betty drank 50% of her fluids today. So I want to chart that, because that will also affect what happens with her medications.
Do you think it's easier or harder to find a proverbial one-size-fit-all place where it has the independent living, it has the assisted living, has the memory care, where you only have to move them once, so to speak? Is that harder or easier to find most of the time?
I think most communities right now have that model. They have the independent and the aging in place model, if you will. So they have independent, assisted, and memory care. And I know at least in the Bay Area, a lot of the communities that didn't have, a few of the apartments earmarked for memory care, they've changed their tune really quick. So now they're saying, you know what, these 5 that were assisted, we're going to go ahead and section that building off and create memory care, because memory care is a huge need right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So as we're looking at places, that you also mentioned that a lot of it's going to depend on what's most important to the family.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously you want to make sure they're well cared for and that they're going to get their medicine when they need to, and that somebody's keeping an eye on them, or the caregivers aren't stressed out and working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
What are some of those other things that we might want to take into consideration that might be really important to the family, in addition to being close?
So in terms of just doing a deep dive with what's important to the family, just kind of identifying, what's important to them. Out here, we have Jewish community living. So if, they celebrate the high holidays, let me identify that. And so I can show you those communities. So, I mean, do they have a spiritual practice? Do they have, maybe a lot of communities will have like a reverend or a pastor that will come in on Sundays. Let's find out what's important to them.
Mhm.
And then just really getting to know that executive director, because that's where the buck stops with the boss.
Right.
So let's get to know. And I always say, hey, if you're going to bring a complaint, also bring some cookies, because I'm telling you, they're working hard. They're really working hard, taking care of a lot of people.
Right.
That was one of the big things when we moved my mom, is that we were so worried about our dad and about how, can he come visit? Can he come often? Because we had no idea how much he was going to be able to see her, how much he was going to be upset if he couldn't see her. So that was a big factor. And the executive director was immediately on his side, and to this day helps him in every way possible. Oh yeah, John, well, we can get you in. We can get you in to see her then, or whatever it may be. And that's been a big factor. And I think in my dad being comfortable with my mom being in memory care
And helping him adjust.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And there is that adjustment period. And if somebody's going into a community alone, especially if they're independent, like I'm having those conversations with the executive director, do you have like a greeting committee that it's going to come in here and walk alongside her, help connect her with some new friends, and like an ambassador. So some communities will have community ambassadors, and it's great. They're walking around with their name tags and come on in, John.
Exactly.
Let me bring you into the fold. So it's very nice.
Right. The ones that will invite you to their lunch table, if you will.
Yes.
That's kind of like, in some ways, going back to elementary school or middle school, where you've got the new kid coming in, and who's going to make sure that they feel comfortable and that they feel welcome.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So many questions. Thanks for giving us so many answers, Christine. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It is so interesting to be able to feel that you have just specific questions and really specific things to look for, because I think that, when you go into a community, you just think, okay, looks nice. But if you notice things like the baseboards aren't clean, or, whatever it is, or the people don't look very engaged, then it really could be a red flag for your situation. Might not be for somebody else.
Like I say, it's a little more detailed than just trying to look for an apartment for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Remember, if you have any other topics you'd like us to talk about and talk to an expert about, let us know. Parenting aging parents.